with invocation. If you would, please pray with me. Our heavenly and gracious Father, we invoke your presence today. Be with us, guide us today as we meet together. Help us to remember all your many blessings, the blue sky, which we are delighted to see, the chirping birds, the leaves returning to the trees, and Lord, even the pollen, which means that life is coming back to earth. Lord, guide our leaders today, our community, our state, and our nation. Protect those who are in harm's way, and bless us in our fellowship and this food and those who prepared it, and help us to remember it is for your service. In Christ's name I pray. Amen. Happy. Now, Carrie, to introduce our visitors. And yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. I noticed today that everybody didn't want to shake my hand or give me a hug, so for those of you who did shake my hand and give me a hug, thank you very much. And for those of you who didn't, just remember you touched the pen that everybody else touched. So we'll just leave that. We'll leave that with you for today. We don't have any visiting Rotarians today, but if you've got a guest, if you'll please stand to introduce your guest. Do we have any guests?
Hi, I'm Carolyn Matthews, and my husband, John McAllister, is here, and he's an accredited land consultant.
I'm Henry Morris, and with me is Miss Lisa Hoffman. She is with the Salvation Army as well. She's the director. I gotta give you, she has a long title now. She has director on public relations, volunteer, and disaster coordinator. So you're welcome with Miss Lisa Hoffman.
Hi, I'm Rhonda Hunsinger, and I am very excited here today to have one of our Rotary Exchange students. Her name is Lauda Sosa, and she is from what we call the Canary Islands, but she would tell you it's the Canary Islands, right? So we're very happy to have her with us today. Thank you.
I think you can hear me. I can speak loud enough. I'm Glenn Ward. I'm delighted to have my daughter Emily with me today. Emily's a student, a junior at USC.
Everyone? All right, well, welcome. Hope everybody has a great week.
Thank you, Carrie, and welcome everybody. And now, health and happiness, Annie Shea.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, congratulations, I guess, to the Lady Gamecocks for winning the SEC after an undefeated regular season. I'm obligated, whenever I mention something nice about the Gamecocks, I have to mention something nice about Clemson. And I saw that the baseball team took it serious against Boston College this weekend, so there you go, for Clemson. Much smaller collaborative for that. Just want to note, obviously, we've all heard about the horrific tornadoes in Tennessee around the Nashville area. Well, it turns out that apparently Susan Elkins' hometown was the town that was hit really hard, where they had 18 fatalities, and unfortunately she's not here because I understand that she's attending some funerals. So obviously keep those folks in your minds, obviously keep Susan and obviously the folks that she's helping console during this hard time in Tennessee, for sure. That was just amazing to see, just how suddenly these things can come and happen and change your world. So some thoughts for the day on that. A quick update from the CART committee. I have been asked to just give you an update that we have collected close to $4,000, $3,933 through mid-January. The year goal is 6,000. We are on a fiscal year, so we're talking about the idea that by the end of June we hit 6,000. So if everybody can continue to give to the CART buckets, I think if every member gives each week, we should be able to hit that goal of 6,000 come at the end of the fiscal year. So please be generous. And of course, if you want to tell Uncle Sam of your generosity and want to make a check to a member, you can make your checks out to the CART fund, and that way, when you get your audit, you can have proof that you give the money. So there you go. So today, I guess my bid for health and happiness is that on Saturday I was asked to speak to a group of high school students, high school journalists, and I was asked what should I speak about, and there's all sorts of things in our business, just like I could do anything else. So I thought I would talk a little bit about life skills and skills about trying to be a professional, trying to stay a professional. And I realized at the end of the whole thing that I really ended up being a whole seminar on I'm your dad and I'm telling you what to do. But in the end, I thought it was interesting because I'm not really sure in high school how much they talk about the idea of the next step. What does it take to become a professional and remain a professional, keep your job, and do those kinds of things. And what I also realized as I was putting together the presentation is that a lot of the advice I was giving was good for anybody, whether you were in law, in medicine, in finance, in you work for a baseball team. I'm just looking around here and all that. Whether you work at the Salvation Army, whatever you do, these were skills. So I thought I'd share a little bit of what I shared with them. This is a pared down of my I think about 20-minute presentation that I'll share here. So on the screens, this is what I shared with the students. And one of the things I talked about first off was that in life you want to dive for loose balls. And this is something that I just remember when I covered basketball, that I always was amazed at watching players, how they would just dive into the crowd, dive into over the scorer's table to keep the action going. And the idea of what I was saying is that when you come to work every day, come to work caring, come to work with that passion, that drive, that you want to make, that you want to make sure that everything's good. So if you're dealing with a customer service situation, go above and beyond. The idea is, are you diving for these loose balls to make sure that your team's going to win? Next slide. So this is a big one. Be a Swiss Army knife. First of all, a quick aside. I found this picture. It's on Amazon. I am not sure it's real or it's really for sale, but it's out there. So there you go. And this is a big one for me as well. You can be given one task, especially let's say as a journalist, you can say, look, I'm a sports reporter, okay? That's all I did. Well, I might need you to cover City Hall. I might need you to cover something at the State House. I might need you to cover a car wreck. The whole idea is that be a Swiss Army knife, have the skills, the passion, the drive to do things that maybe are not necessarily in your wheelhouse and you need to help. I mean, again, we've all had to learn how to use the office copy machine at some point. Congratulations, you're being a Swiss Army knife if that's not normally your task and you've learned to learn that technology, if you've gotten that technology. But the whole idea is be flexible and learn a lot of things. Get the big picture. I think people get caught up a lot of times, forest for the trees for the forest. So the idea is get above, see what the connections are, see where it all fits in. So the idea is that you may see one situation and say, this is only happening here in Columbia. Well, it might be happening in other places as well. Or when I was talking to the high school students at other high schools, ask, look around, see what the connections are, see what all that is about. So I think that's a good advice. Be skeptical. So I made a distinction with the students. I said there's a difference between being cynical and skeptical. Cynical means, and I sort of use the example of sitting here and saying that the high school you compete with is stupid and silly, as opposed to be skeptical when you're told something along the lines of, that you're told the other school is better academically. Well, how? Well, you want to prove it. Go look at test scores. Go get records, that kind of thing. So the idea is don't take anything at face value. Ask questions, ask why, ask for proof, but be polite about it. This is a big one, develop a thick skin. Especially in my business, but I think, again, I'm looking at an entire crowd of people who have thick skins, who have built thick skins over the years, whether it's the customer, the public, your colleagues, your kids, saying things to you, and you having to say, be the bigger person and say, that's really neat that you feel that way. how can I help you today? Even though inside you're saying, how can I, want to do something else to you? But that's a big thing. And again, talking to students and talking to your employees and talking to your colleagues and even in your own head, the idea is that you just want to obviously not take everything personally, not take everything as it's really aimed at you. Someone might be having a bad day, and you just end up being the next person that they've seen. But the idea is develop that thick skin. All right, I always stress this as this is the one question to ask, and I do this as a reporter because it's what I ask a lot of times. I'll ask somebody, they'll go, I'll sit here and I'll ask a political candidate, what's your favorite book? And they'll say, they'll say Cat in the Hat, I'm making this up. And I'll go, why? And they'll say, well, what's my favorite children's book? Well, it's a children's book. Why is it? Why is that? And you keep on going to why until you get to their motivation. The reason I love Cat in the Hat was it was the book that my grandma read to me. My grandma was my inspiration, and she's the reason why I'm running for office. Well, all of a sudden, you've got a deeper answer, you've got a better answer. But again, in all your lives, it matters more. Keep on asking why. Try to understand someone's motivation and all of this. And I always say that that's just really basically the one question you should ask, and it's the one time, it's the most common thing I do with my reporters and saying, you got this, but why are they doing this? Why is this happening? And finally, I always sit here and say, what is the one dumb question that's out there? I'll just throw it out. What do you think the one dumb question is?
Question not asked.
Bingo. There you go. You want a bell. That is it. Exactly. The question that's not asked. I'm too ashamed to ask, I'm too embarrassed to ask, I'm gonna look stupid if I ask it. You know what I mean? I don't remember someone's name, I don't remember how to do this, I know you just showed me. Doesn't matter, ask it. People wanna help. I mean, I really get in my business, even with people who I am running stories about that are not necessarily positive, they still appreciate the fact that I'm coming back and I'm asking them for clarification or that kind of thing, because it means I care, I want to get things right, I want to ask. So again, that's really the one thing I like to share with folks. So I think the high school students got something out of it. At least they killed 45 minutes of their life, hopefully effectively, and all of that. And I think I've killed about 5 minutes of yours. So, but I appreciate it all, and I want you to have a great rest of the week, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy. We all got something out of that. We appreciate it. Okay, I just have a few quick announcements. One, the Bocce Bash, we will give you an update next week. But if you want to make a big impression, as Andy said, make your checks out to Special Olympics, not the Rotary Club, Special Olympics. So, but they will give you more of an update on Bocce Bash and our sponsors next week. Hope you have all signed up for the All Club Rotary meeting conference, which is the end of this month. DAC-DB is where you go, so if you have any trouble doing that, let us know. And I'm hoping you can especially be there at Friday lunch. That would be super. And the March 30th meeting here will be at Sewell's, but not lunchtime. It's going to be at 5:30 to 6:30. And we will give you more update on that next week as well. And also, in response to the coronavirus, we're keeping you posted. We're doing things as we are advised. For now, I think we're fine. Meeting, not shaking hands is okay. Hugs probably carry. That's fun too. But not shaking hands is okay. So just use your own common sense. And of course, as much as we'll miss you, if you're not feeling well, just stay home. So thanks. And now, one of our favorite service projects is the Salvation Army Bell Ribbon. And here today to make some awards is Major Morris and Chase Heather.
Good afternoon, everyone. Salvation Army staff, get ready. Here we are in March. Can't believe time flies. It's already been 2 months since our annual bell ringing project for the holiday season as a Rotary Club. I just want to first of all thank everyone who participated in that. Well, I have many thank yous to give today, but one specifically I want to give is to my co-chair, Amy Shane. It was nice having a coach here in the same office as you. It was very nice to be able to just kind of compare notes and work together on that project. So Amy's a great chair, I really appreciate it. We have awards to give today and a lot of thanks to share and some fun numbers to share as well. I'd like to have Major Henry Morris and Ms. Lisa Huffman join me on stage.
Thank you for allowing us to meet. Again, my name is Major Henry Morris. Oh, thank you. With the Salvation Army, and we appreciate you helping us out every year with the kettle season. It's a very rewarding for us as well as for you. You get a chance to meet people, you get a chance to just tell your story, and you get to hear stories. And it's a wonderful opportunity that we get to do with that. One of my favorite times is when we get to do that. And we thank you. We thank you for being part of that. Columbia Rotary ran at 3 locations this season, as you know. On Walmart on Forest Drive, Greens on Assembly, and Piggly Wiggly on Divine Street. And everyone that participated did an incredible job. And I want to just give yourself a round of applause right now. We thank you so much for doing that. Everyone participated did a wonderful job. But there were 3 captains that participated, that led their group, that raised the top amounts at each location. And we're going to acknowledge them at this time, if they're here. Mr. Elliott Powell, is he here? He is not here today. Well, he was one. He was one of the captains with the best performing day at Walmart on Forest Drive, raising $440 on that day. Stephen Creech, is he here? Oh, come on up, sir. Stephen was the captain with the best performing day at Piggly Wiggly on Divine Street, raising $324, and we want to acknowledge you with the bill. I can find the right one for you. There you go, right there, that's your one. All right. And we have another one, Mr. Rusty DePass. Mr. Rusty, come on down, sir. He was the captain for the Greens Assembly with the overall highest total at the location, raising total of $472. Thank you, thank you. And I'd also like to give a special shout out to two of our people that organized it and spearheaded and called you guys and did all kinds of things to get you to come. And that is Mr. Chase Heatherly and Andy Shane. You will come over, please. And we want to thank you for making everything run smoothly. No, it wasn't easy, but we thank you for your perseverance, and you just continue to go on. And we just want to give you a little token as well. Chase, that's yours. Mr. Andy, that is yours. Thank you.
Andy, that's going to be front page, right?
Now, if I can,
Hang on.
now I want to turn this over to Miss Lisa, and she's going to recognize other captains at this time.
All of the captains that led the groups this past Christmas season did an amazing job to help the Columbia Rotary Club reach their grand total. I wanted to take a moment to recognize all the 2019 bell ringing captains. If you were a captain, please stand up. The red kettles are iconic and part of the Christmas tradition in the Midlands and all across the country. The goal of the bell ringers is to create an experience at the kettle. And I must say, the Columbia Rotary Club does just that. Especially if you were to hear Elliott Powell sing Christmas carols at Walmart. Y'all just do a fine job for the Salvation Army. You give everyone a kettle experience, and they want to come back year after year. So for that, the Salvation Army of the Midlands is deeply grateful. All of these captains and all of the people that rang the bell are truly doing the most good and helping the underserved population here in the Midlands all year long. Please give yourselves an applaud and thank you very much from the Salvation Army.
Thank you guys very much. And now, to introduce our speaker, Dr. Jim Morris.
Well, hello again, everybody. I'm Jim. I run the South Carolina Council on Economic Education. So for me, I'm looking out at these great opportunities to, we got the stock market caving in, good opportunity. We run the stock market game for kids, thousands of kids across the state of South Carolina. So, that whole dollar cost averaging, buy low, sell high, hold forever. Those are cool things. So I look positively as much as I can on this. Also, the virus has a tendency to disrupt supply chains. So in my mind, this is a great look for the positive, the silver lining. Maybe we all won't be so dependent on China, and we'll distribute that a little bit. And I only think that's going to be good for the U.S. and the rest of the world. So hopefully those are things that people will walk away from in this. Now let me introduce Dr. Rusty Mulholland. I met him about a month ago. We have a few things in common. We both lived in Kansas a bit, him a bit more than me. We have 4 children. We both have a rising freshman at the Honors College, so I'm excited to see, I'm really hoping, as he is too, I think, that his daughter will choose to follow up on that. And he's also, I did not introduce him as a guest Rotarian, but he is a Rotarian from Columbia, Missouri, Rotary Club, and is now a Rotarian here in the Capital City Club. So he is a guest Rotarian. Rusty is the President and Executive Director of the South Carolina Commission on Higher Education, where he's been for about 8 months. Prior to this, he was the Assistant Commissioner of Academic Affairs at the Missouri Department of Higher Education, where he oversaw the design and implementation and monitoring of public policies relating to academic programs, assessment and student success, and institutional performance. Prior to that, he was Associate Professor of History and Director for Master of Arts and Humanities program at Hood College in Frederick, Maryland. He previously held appointments in Washburn University, Rockhurst University, University of Kansas, the Missouri, Columbia, teaching courses in 20th century America in the 60s, and in race relations, civil rights movement, etc. He has written a number of books. His first book, This is America, the 60s in St. Lawrence, Kansas, received the Edward Tien Publication Award. He's also written several other books, and I think you probably can see his book, or saw his bio up there before. He also is the editor of Baby Boom, People and Perspectives, published by ABC Clio in 2010, and he's published many, many articles and reviews and given numerous presentations. Prior to entering academia, he worked as a welder and machinist and was the general manager of a custom steel fabrication shop, a native Kansan. Rusty began taking college courses in the evening while still working full-time and received his baccalaureate degree at Washburn University of Topeka with a dual major in history and political science. He earned his master's degree and doctorate degrees in history from the University of Kansas. He and his wife, Sonia, have 4 children, 2 still at home, and he's got 3 grandchildren. Please welcome Dr. Rusty.
I guess he forgot to mention my Nobel Peace Prize. Well, thank you, Jim, for that nice introduction, and thank you for the invitation to speak. Mason, thank you for arranging everything. It's my pleasure to be here with you today. As Jim mentioned, I am a Rotarian. I joined the Columbia, Missouri Club. I guess it's been about 5 years ago now, and just recently transferred my membership to the Columbia Capital Rotary, I guess is what we're called. So let me begin just by telling you a little bit about myself. I go by Rusty because that's my given name. The only thing I can figure out is Mom wanted a son and Dad wanted an Irish setter. I grew up in Kansas, as Jim mentioned. I worked for a number of years with my dad as a welder and machinist. Dad taught me how to weld when I was about 11 or 12 years old. That was a good life. I enjoyed the work, but I reached a point where kind of the physical demands and kind of intellectual curiosity, I was attracted to start college. I didn't start college till I was 28 years old, to kind of fit into that mold of the non-traditional student. While working full-time, and of course with the support of my family, including my wife and young children at the time, I started at Washburn University, went full-time and worked full-time. I completed my undergraduate degree in about 4.5 years. Decided I wanted to teach at the college level. Went to the University of Kansas where I got my master's and doctorate in American history. I think I established myself as a well-respected scholar of 20th century U.S. history. Got tenure at Hood College in Frederick, Maryland. It's just kind of a suburb of D.C. Kind of the lure of the Midwest and wanting to use other skills I developed. It took me into state level policy development. I took a job with the Missouri Department of Higher Ed. And when this opportunity came along, it was just about a year ago this time that I applied for and last May was offered a position at the commission. I've been here since July, as Jim said, about 8 months. My wife and youngest child, my daughter Rachel, are still in Columbia, Missouri. That's probably the worst part of this job right now. Is, the commute is hell, let me tell you. But Rachel has been admitted to the Honors College here at the University of South Carolina. I think that's where Mom and I are rooting, but I'm not sure that's where Rachel's her first choice is. She's a smart kid, she'll figure it out though. I work for the South Carolina Commission on Higher Education. For those of you that don't know what the commission is, it was created by the General Assembly in 1967. It is the coordinating body for South Carolina's 33 public institutions of higher education. The primary focus of the commission is to ensure access, affordability, and quality through the state system of higher education through coordination, regulation, advocacy, and oversight. We are led by a lay board, a 15-member board. Several of the members are appointed by the governor. The individuals from the congressional districts are appointed through the legislative delegations, and then we have some representatives from the different sectors, the technical college, the comprehensive universities, and the research institutions, as well as the independent institutions. We do a number of things. We do statewide planning. We provide statewide policy direction, management, and oversight of the state's higher education system. We approve new academic programs that are proposed by public institutions. We license non-public institutions that want to operate in South Carolina. We maintain a funding system and a data and accountability systems that are essential for understanding the performance of our institutions. We approve capital projects, leases, and land purchases, and we collect and report data on the same. We oversee the administration of state financial aid to provide equity in awards and consistency of selection criteria. And generally, we advocate on behalf of higher ed, in supporting increased access to and success in higher education. And really, we're trying to coordinate with our colleagues in K-12 to ensure that that transition from K-12 to higher ed is one that's effective and smooth. Our annual budget is, it looks a little inflated when you look at the overall number because so much of that is pass-through dollars in the form of federal dollars that we then allocate on behalf of veterans, for example, but also the the state financial aid programs that we administer. The portion that we actually have for administration is around $2.6 million. My staff and I, together, we have about 40 FTEs. Our system, our higher education system in South Carolina, and I would include in this not just the 33 public institutions, but also the independent and for-profit institutions as well. It's a huge, complex, complicated system. Those 84 institutions are a vast enterprise and together account for some $4.5 billion in economic impact throughout the state. Trying to get that system to work, it's an informal system. Each institution has its own governing body, so coordination, trying to be comprehensive and responsive is at best, I think, a difficult task. What we try to focus on and where I think we can be successful is by looking at long-term strategic issues such as access and affordability. Are our institutions, both public and independent, producing the credentials that the state needs? Are there ways that we can find greater efficiency across the system? And can we develop and look at our policies to ensure that they are consistent with our long-term goals? How effective we are, I think, depends primarily on three things. The adequacy of our resources. Two, the quality of our analysis and information. That is, if we provide good advice, good counsel to the legislature, to the institutions with whom we work, I think our credibility, our legitimacy increases, and I think that makes us a more responsive, a more valued partner. But primarily, I think our success hinges on how well we can forge strong, effective, collaborative working relationships with our stakeholders. Stakeholders are many. That would obviously include the institutions, but within the institutions, the presidents, the provosts, the business, the financial officers, faculty, students, business and industry, the larger public. So we have a number of different stakeholders we try to engage with, and we want to build strong collaborative partnerships with. About 2 years ago, the Commission developed and approved what's known as Public Agenda 2017. It is a collection of goals, rather broad, high-level goals, that kind of committed the state to developing a talent pipeline that is looking at the overall educational system and looking at ways, how do we encourage, how do we develop the talent we have in the state to meet the needs of the state. At its heart was this goal, kind of this big goal, that is that 60% of all adults in South Carolina will, by the year 2025, have a high-quality workforce-related credential, that is a degree or certificate. This goal has been promoted probably most notably by the Lumina Foundation out of Indianapolis, Indiana. And it's really based on the premise that by the year 2025, if it isn't here already, that all new jobs will require, 60% of all new jobs will require some kind of post-secondary, that is post-high school credential. Now, it doesn't have to be a four-year baccalaureate degree or even a two-year associate degree. It could be a workforce-related credential, certified nurse's aide, for example. And especially those workforce certificates that can be stacked and lead to employment, but also allows a student to continue education and build upon those skills and add additional credentials and additional awards as they move along. Let me skip back to one slide here, if I may. I inherited this, and it's a great collection of goals, but what it doesn't really have is any blueprint, any pathway, roadmap for getting us there. One of the first things I did when I came on as president and executive director was to work with the Hunt Institute out of Duke University, and with their assistance we formed the Higher Education Advisory Committee. We were fortunate that former Governor Jim Hodges agreed to chair it with us. But members of our advisory committee include folks from the governor's office and cabinet, legislators, faculty, business leaders, students, other state agencies, and so forth. What we've asked them to do is look at that public agenda, look at the larger higher education landscape both in South Carolina and across the nation, and make some recommendations for specific initiatives, specific projects, specific areas that we should focus on. We'll take that information and then work with it to try and move forward to put together an implementation plan that will animate the public agenda and start moving us closer to that larger goal, that 60% attainment goal. While in Missouri, we referred to this as the big goal. We adopted such a goal early on. Actually, South Carolina, as a state, has not adopted this goal. I believe we're one of 4 or 5 states in the nation not to have adopted some kind of attainment goal. Why focus on educational attainment? Well, I think there are a couple of different categories we might look at. One, the knowledge-based society and our economy demands workers with greater skills and knowledge. As I said, it doesn't have to be a baccalaureate or associate degree, but increasingly, education beyond high school is going to be the norm for all of our citizens. Post-secondary education, post-secondary credentials ensure greater lifetime earnings as well. It also minimizes the impact of economic change. If we go back to the Great Recession, that's been, what, about 11, 12 years ago, Jim, am I dating that about right, more or less? We can see that the higher one's educational attainment, the better they were able to weather that economic downturn. And so if we have more people into the workforce with the skills that are in demand, when we have these kinds of economic downturns, I think the impact will be, I don't want to paint a perfectly rosy picture, but it will be minimized. Those jobs come back much quicker than those that do not require post-secondary education. You might ask, where are we right now? If this is our goal, and be perfectly honest, I don't think we can get to 60% by 2025. That was probably a little too ambitious. I have some expectation that we might get there by 2030, however. Lumina every year puts out a scorecard to kind of track where everyone is. South Carolina right now, we're just under 45% educational attainment. That is, about 45% of the working age population has some kind of post-secondary workforce credential. The national average is about 48.4%. We rank 38th nationally. DC is the highest, probably not surprising given the concentration of professionals in the federal city. The lowest, actually, West Virginia last year was the lowest, but Nevada, I guess, do you surpass or has fallen a tick below West Virginia to take that bottom spot. We are up a little bit over last year. about 1% and just a little over 8% from last year. It's not going to be easy to get to that 60% goal. If you look at this, my pointer's working, but if you look at the green line, that would be our progress. If we look kind of historical, how have we increased educational attainment kind of year over year? And if you look at the top line, that's where we need to be to get to that 60%. So every year that passes, what we have to do is replace those credentials of people that age out of the workforce, 65 and older. So we have to replace those, but at the same time we have to increase those numbers. We can't just do a simple one-to-one replacement for them. It won't be easy, but I think nonetheless it's an aspirational goal, but a worthy goal. And I think it helps provide some unity and some cohesion as we try to work with our institutions and try to move forward. After all, is anyone in the room opposed to having more people being educated in the state? I didn't think there was, but I think it's really a goal that most everyone can get behind and latch on to. A couple of the challenges we face, and there are many, but I'll just touch on a few here. 4-year enrollments are mostly flat, and for the 2-year institutions, they've declined steadily over the last decade or so. Regionally, across the country, the Midwest and the Northeast have seen greater declines in their enrollments. High school graduation rates will peak in about 2025 and will not return to 2007-11 levels until the 2030s. What that means is there are going to be fewer high school students for the institutions to bring into their classrooms. So the pressure on enrollment is going to remain flat. Enrollment, of course, generates tuition dollars. And because there's going to be a finite pool of students in South Carolina, I think that's only going to increase the competition among our institutions for students, because each student means additional tuition revenue. We're more fortunate than some areas of the country, but I don't want to paint too rosy of a picture in that regard. Another challenge are changing public perceptions of higher ed. Many of you have probably read in the newspaper or magazines or seen television shows that talk about more and more people question the value of higher education. This is complicated by the increase in debt taken on by students, as well as kind of what many people see as the runaway costs of higher ed as well. These are concerns, and I'm not trying to dismiss them. Keeping costs in check, I think, is incredibly important. The legislature has recognized that, and I believe they are recommending this year, as they did last year, increase state support in exchange for flat or frozen tuition for in-state students, which is a step in the right direction, I believe. We also need to do more to help more students complete. Part of our student loan crisis right now, it's an issue, and I don't want to just ignore it, but part of the biggest chunk of people that actually default on student loans are those people that have less than $10,000 in debt, and what they've done is they haven't completed. What we know from experience from the data, the best default prevention program is academic completion. That is the completion of a credential of some kind. If I could offer a lesson in addition to the ones that Mr. DeShane offered earlier, always check your printer before you leave to make sure you brought all of the pieces of your presentation because I think the last 4 or 5 pages of mine are still sitting on my printer. I am, I think, eternally optimistic, and I will, until something convinces me otherwise, I'm an unabashed supporter of higher education, the value of higher education. Not just the baccalaureate degree, but any kind of post-secondary education. The information economy demands that we have more and more of our citizenry educated to have the kind of skills that this modern information economy demands. I think there's going to be tremendous pressure on traditional higher education to change over the next decade or two. I mentioned the flat number of traditional students. I think one thing higher ed's going to have to do a better job of is looking for non-traditional students. Of course, as a non-traditional student myself, I can relate to that. And it's a difficult task to kind of alter your culture, alter your schedule, and alter your approach to really reach out and help those students who are either returning to college, who never began, or whose skills need some upgrading at this point. We really are at a crossroads, I think, in higher education. We've been transformed by the information revolution, but I don't think we've totally come to terms with what that revolution means. In many respects, higher education doesn't look a lot different today than it did 40 years ago, probably 100 years ago, and perhaps even 200 years or so ago. The model is very much similar and would look very similar to someone coming back at that time. But we need to do more. We have to do more. And I think we have the potential to do more. We have to make better use of our resources. We have to encourage more people to pursue post-secondary education. We need to convince more people of the value of post-secondary education. That will be my goal, that will be my objective in leading the Commission on Higher Education. And whether we reach that 60% goal or not, I suppose the jury is still out on that. But I have a lot of confidence in the staff that works with me, the people that we work with in the institutions at the colleges and universities. And I think there's a real need, a real desire within the state itself that education is a key partner in continuing to drive the economic growth and development of the state. So I'll stop there. I think I have a few minutes left. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Yes, sir.
I'm sitting here trying to figure out the gap between what you're charged with and the tools you've been given to do it. They say in your charge, for example, to make college more affordable, but you pointed out that you're not, each board sets its own tuition. You don't have a pot of money, well, somewhat a pot of money for scholarships, but not a whole lot. So suppose you decide that tuition ought to drop across the board 3% or offending universities 5 or 6%. How can you possibly make that happen? I mean, do you have an impossible task?
I don't think it's impossible. Tuition is set by the governing boards. I think there are opportunities within our agency, opportunities in our work with the institutions to help them understand the impact, understand the consequences. Part of the issue here also is helping the legislature and the larger public understand if we want to support higher education, if we think it's important to our economic growth and economic development in the state and helping us have the workforce that I think we want and need, then there's a cost that comes along with that. I think it's not, as state appropriations declined over the last 10 years or so, it's not surprising that tuition went up. The cost of higher education, we could argue whether they've gone up too fast or too much, but there's going to be a cost associated with running a university, with running a technical college, or a small institution. I don't have the authority to just say you need to quit doing this. I think it's, we have the power of convening, we have the power of data and of information. And I think, you know, again, as I said, if we use that to our advantage, if we make good analysis and provide good information, that together we can find ways to help, if not bring down, at least limit any increase cost to higher education. I think, ma'am, you had a question?
Yes, I did. And you may not be the right person to answer this, but I thought at least I'd ask. As to student debt, you indicated you went to school and worked full-time, and it only took you 4.5 years to graduate, and presumably you used some of that money to help pay for your education. What is causing our student debt? Is it because students aren't willing to work or work-study anymore? Is it because they need to live in high-rise apartments with swimming pools and movie theaters on the top and not in rat-infested dorms? Is it because tuition has gone up immensely? Or is it some combination thereof? And as I say, maybe you're the right person to comment on this, but you know, we hear so much from the politicians about student debt and how we need to help these students, and I'm just wondering, are they helping themselves get a higher education?
Well, I think it's a little, maybe the answer is yes. Certainly, I think there has been a number of changes. One, the federal government took over 10 years ago all student loans.
That's the answer.
But I would also suggest part of the answer may be with us, or at least the generation of people that have students in college. My son is a junior at the University of Missouri, and Columbia, Missouri has overbuilt its student housing in the private sector. And this is anecdotal, and as one of my good friends used to say, the plural of anecdote is not data. But the point is, there was an article about a new high-rise that came in with big screen TVs and marble countertops and all that. And there was a parent that quoted, said, "I don't want my daughter living in those dormitories." So, you know, those costs of housing, the total cost of attendance, I think has been a contributing factor to the increased cost, overall costs of higher education. And because there's the federal government, or when the states were controlling student loans, there used to be limits on the amount students could borrow. Well, I think now there's really not many limits other than one's own discretion on how much students can actually borrow. And sadly, and again, it's a complicated story, and I don't think there's one single explanation for it. But we hear from the institutions constantly about students who are supporting families, either their own or perhaps their parents, who will take student loans and use that money then to pay family rent, to help mom and dad and so forth. So it's a complex, complicated issue. Certainly one that demands our attention, and we're trying to work with various stakeholders to see what we can do to fix that. And again, I think the biggest issue is, can we get more students to have something in their hand when they leave school, so that employment then can help them make their payments. I think I'm getting the hook, but thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
token of appreciation. Thank you. Okay, next week, March 16th.
I failed to mention the total amount. Now, people have been asking me that. I wanted to give the total amount. I apologize for that. The total amount for Rotary, Columbia Rotary was $5,144.
Thank you, Benjamin. Okay, Mason.
Next week, we have Dr. Linda Bell from DHEC. She is the state epidemiologist coming to talk about virus. She's not bringing free samples.
Thanks, guys. I hope you have a wonderful week, and let's close in song.
Which one is it? Look at age 24 to 65.